with debt, specifically in my case, with real estate debt. This video comes from a question that is a very important question to me. And it was one of the main things that I had to consider before I retired early. The question is, what is your exit strategy if there is an economic downturn affecting tenants not being able to pay their rent with 70% or even 50% debt ratio that you carry? Now, the reason I want to talk about this question specifically in a video all by its own and not just answer this comment, which I appreciate every comment that comes in, even the stupid haters who in this last week kept telling me over and over and over that nobody can save money because everyone is broke. Well, if people start saving, they won't be broke. And the first step to saving is increasing your income. So let's take the logic train together. What is my exit strategy if there's an economic downturn and my tenants can't pay their rent and I have debt? Now, the reason this person put 70% loan to value or 50% loan to value is because when I was growing my real estate portfolio, which took a decade, right? This doesn't happen overnight. This takes planning, discipline, and time, all coming together. Luck being when opportunity meets preparation. I got very lucky, but it took a decade. While growing the portfolio, my goal was to maintain a 70% loan to value. I wanted as much leverage as I could without being over levered, meaning that I was gaining appreciation on multiples of what I invested. I was using levered depreciation to be able to never pay taxes on my rental income. And when I retired and I didn't have the safety that comes from that drug that kills our dreams, the paycheck, I reduced my levered position, my overall portfolio levered position from 70% down to 50%. So this person has watched some content and isn't just a hater coming and saying, hey, what you're doing doesn't work for everybody because everyone's broke. There are some people who this will not work for. There are people who don't even invest for retirement at all. When I talk about reaching financial freedom, I usually talk about the three main methods, right? Starting and growing a business with the goal of getting it to where it's large enough to where someone else runs the day-to-day so you get your time back. Then there's investing in stocks using the 4% rule and having decades for compound interest to be a thing, using retirement accounts and planning with a lot more income and time than I had to reach financial freedom. And if you're doing that, I really suggest checking out Joe Kuhn here on YouTube, Kuhn. He used the buckets method to be ready for something like an economic downturn, to plan for pandemic, recession, stock market crash, prolonged government shutdown, all those things that can impact somebody who's invested in the stock market. And so he used the buckets method to be ready for that. And he is much smarter than me and can explain it much better than I can. So if you want to understand the buckets method or how do you invest in stocks to reach financial freedom, I also suggest checking out Joe Kuhn. But if you invest in real estate, there are people who do an amalgamation, right? They start a side hustle, they invest in stocks, they own some rentals, right? There's a way to do that. Now, me, I had such a short timeline and I was making such a low income that real estate had to be my all in. I am not an entrepreneur. I've tried running a couple businesses. For myself, it didn't work. I'm a better employee. I can grow a business for someone else, but not myself. So running a business wasn't an option. I didn't have the income or the time for stocks to work for me. So I chose real estate, 100%. I don't own any stocks. I don't have any money in retirement accounts. I don't own any crypto. If I had any of those things, I'd probably still be working. Not that they're not right for you or for somebody else. They're just not right for me. Since I'm 100% invested in real estate, what happens if tenants can't pay their rent? What if there's an economic downturn? What if rents have never gone down since we started tracking the data in 1940? But what if they do? The reason this question is so intelligent, and I'm glad that somebody would think, what do you do if you have debt? Because the last thing I would want to be is debt-free. I want to be bad debt-free, but I almost wish I had more good. I actually might take out more good debt, get myself closer to the 50% loan to value because I'm not quite there right now. So here's a couple of things I've done to be able to retire early with confidence and sleep like a baby and not the one that wakes up every hour screaming. I mean, one actually sleeps all the way through the night. That Swan account, Sleep Well at Night, is, one of the first things is understanding that rents have never gone down market-wide since we've started tracking the data. Now, in 2009 and 10, Class A properties did kind of go down because when there's an economic downturn, it's really hard to replace $150,000 or a $200,000 income. So they go from a Class A property to a B. So one of the first things I did is I invest specifically, I target Class C properties because during an economic downturn, a couple of things happen. Well, right now, we have record low unemployment, right? It's under 4%. We have record wage inflation, which is one of the things contributing to inflation. My properties are Class C. They're not super high end. They cover my three criteria, right? Safe, clean, and functional. If there's an economic downturn, there is more demand for Class C properties. So the asset class that I own has more demand. When there's more demand, I'll make more money. Rents in Class C properties, and even in 2009 and 10, went up because all of the millions of people going through foreclosures became renters, increasing demand on properties like the ones that I own. And my guest reminded me that I didn't send a Zoom invite because my memory is what it is. So it'll be just a second while I send this invite. Speaking of invites, if you're in the course, there is a May Zoom calls happening at 6 p.m. on Tuesdays. And tonight, Michael Zuber from One Rental at a Time is joining us. Investing in Class C properties where the rents go up in economic downturns is very important. But the other thing that I mentioned is it's really hard to replace an income of $150,000 or $200,000 if you're a tech worker making a lot of money and you get laid off because there's an economic downturn. Sometimes you might have to take a pay cut, which means you can't pay your rent or you have to downsize where you're renting at. The tenants that I have in my Class C properties where rents are $1,500 to $2,500, I do have one that's at $3,000, but that's Section 8. One of the other things I'm going to cover. Unemployment pays enough to cover the rent if somebody's laid off during a downturn. And it's easier to replace a $20 to $25 an hour job than it is to replace a $150,000 a year job. So the tenants that I have in place, even during the pandemic of 2020, I never had one late or missing rent payment. Because even the ones that lost their job, unemployment, extended unemployment, stimulus was more money than it takes to pay their bills, and replacing their jobs with something that probably paid more than where they were at was actually easier for them. So I'm investing in properties, targeting properties that benefit from economic downturns. Now let's go off of the math of what if rents go down. Okay, so here's what it looks like with debt and why debt was why I could retire. Over the period of a decade, I invested $320,000 of my own money coming from my selling my life 1 hour at a time income at the W-2 job. And I did invest some of the cash flow from the rentals, but if I had saved up $320,000 and had purchased a duplex with no debt, buying it all cash, I might be able to find one in a cheaper area than I'm in now. Because when I first started buying, they were 300,000. Now they're 6, 7, 800,000. So that wouldn't have even got me one. I'd have had to move to a lower cost of living place, further out, farther from work, still be working and own one duplex with no debt. So I'd have one tenant paying me. I'd have a paid off property where I still have taxes, insurance, upkeep, and saving for CapEx in the future. I'd still be working for another 20, 30 years if that was the way to buy it without debt. But since I levered debt, my first property I had bought with $15,000 down, 5% down, $300,000 duplex. Then over the next decade, I invested that $320,000 out of my own income and the rental cash flow. And this was when I retired in 2022. So this isn't even what's improved since then. But the rents coming in were a little over $30,000 a month, and the mortgages going out were between $8,000 and $9,000 a month. Right? Insurance and taxes can change every year, so I'm saying 8 to 9 because it was 8. It's closer to 9 now per month going out. So if half my tenants didn't pay and I only had $15,000 coming in, I'd only have $6,000 to live on when I live on about 4 because I house hacked one of the units of a duplex. At the time, I was house hacking one of the units of a fourplex, and the numbers have gotten much better since then. I drive a paid off vehicle. So yes, I'd only be saving $1,000 or $2,000 a month if 50% of my rents didn't come in, or if rents dropped by 50%, even though in the asset class that I invest, they have never gone down since we started tracking the data. I invested like it was going to. Because I invested with debt, I was able to get so much more cash flow than the cost of the debt, that it is multiples of what the debt is, of what the debt coverage, the servicing the debt is, so that I can handle rents going down. I can handle a recession because now let's say there was a serious economic event and people can't pay their rent when they did in 2020. And we had things like the second part of the CARES Act came out where they set aside $46 billion for rent relief. That the first part of CARES Act, the problem was tenants had to apply for it and qualify. The second part, they just said, no, the landlord just has to apply for it. So it got fixed in the second part. So in a bad economic downturn, we've been shown that there is a safety net to catch us. Then we have forbearance. You can actually go and say, hey, look, because of these economic downturns, here's the things I'm going through. Here's the mortgages I'm not going to be paying. You're still going to pay your taxes. You're probably still going to pay your insurance, right? But you can take care of part of that mortgage because of this. So that only $6,000 I would be getting if half my tenants stopped paying their rent would actually be more because I'd have options like forbearance. I could tap equity, right? I have a paid off property. This was when I retired. I have another one since then. Paying off the one before I retired was a huge mistake, cost me $1 million. I don't regret it, but it was a mistake. So that was a equity that I could have tapped. When I say tap equity, it means add debt to an existing asset. So I could have done that, or I could have sold the asset, which would have reduced my monthly cash flow, but it would have given me a several $100,000 influx of cash to handle the economic downturn. My own version of the buckets method that I don't have for stocks because I don't invest in stocks. I made a video about a month ago that covered basically 17 different ways to make more money without raising the rents. And I don't remember all 17 now because I did it for that video. One of the simple ways is call your insurance companies and raise your deductibles and shop around for better quotes to see if you can bring down some of your expenses. But there was 17 ways in that one video on how to make more money without raising rent. You could also raise rent. During recessions, home values have gone up 4 out of the last 6 recessions. And one of those recessions was caused by a housing crash. So for the majority of times, home values go up during a recession, which means it's harder to buy. When it's harder to buy, like it is now, it creates more demand on rentals. When there's more demand on rentals, what happens in a limited supply? And you have increased demand, rents go up. The way we handle an economic downturn when we invest in any asset class is we don't have lofty expectations of what we think is going to happen. We sit back and we say, worst case scenario, what could happen? Rents could go down by 50%. 50% of my tenants might not pay their rent. I then further diversified my properties by doing 2 other things. I targeted properties that were 10 miles or more apart. I have 2 that are 7 because they were great deals, but the rest are more than 10 miles from each other. And yeah, it adds a little drive time when I ever want to go to a property, which I'm actually doing tomorrow because somebody wants to give me a check for $5,400. So I think I'm going to go there to that property, which I could have a leasing agent go do since I use Hemline. I could step up to the 3rd tier and have them go handle it for me. But I still enjoy getting money and meeting tenants. It's really weird. Howdy, Mike. We'll get to you in just a second. Let me finish up with these last 2 things that I do to make sure that I'm ready for half my tenants not to pay their rent. If something like Boeing or Amazon shuts down a terminal or a plant or moves out of the state, or a BRAC meeting shuts down a base or a port goes on strike, one of my properties would be impacted because they're at least 10 miles apart, drawing tenants from several different economic drivers. Then the other thing that I do, and the last thing that I do to protect myself from things like that pandemic, long government shutdown, stock market crash, or going on a date that can cost way too much money. Nobody should do that. Is I diversify my tenant base. My goal, it's not a perfect science, but my goal is to keep about 1/3 Section 8, 1/3 military, and 1/3 working or retired. And whenever I bring this up, somebody in the comments will attack me and say, well, you can't do that. That's discrimination. So yeah, if you put out an ad that said Section 8 only, I don't know if you probably do that and probably get away with it in Gary, but if you put something military only or no military apply, yeah, you'd get sued and you'd lose. But you can control where you advertise. If my goal is to have a military tenant and I go on base and I advertise my listing, what type of tenant do you think I'm going to get? A military service member or probably a contractor on base? If I call the Section 8 housing authority for the county where I invest and I say, I have a unit coming online on Tuesday, here's the link. Can you share it with your clients? Who's probably going to be the first qualified applicant to apply? So I don't think I've ever had a perfect 1/3 ratio or properties divisible by 3, but it's as close as I can get it so that if we do have something like half the tenants can't pay, well, my Section 8 is going to continue to pay. My military is going to continue to pay. Now, I lose 50% of 1/3. So whatever the math is on that, that can impact me. A prolonged government shutdown, yes, service members might go a 2-week period without a paycheck. And so I might have a delay in my rent coming in. Even on a 69-day government shutdown, Section 8 continued to pay. So I don't have concerns of that, but I am diversified in several different ways. I targeted an asset class that benefits from bad economic times. And I really suggest if you do other things like start and grow a business, figure out who in your space is planning on bad times and what did they do for that. If you invest in stocks, go to channels like Joe Coons and find out how does the bucket method work? How does he plan for 4 years of a bear market and be able to survive that and not stress out? That's what you should do. If you invest in real estate, you don't have to diversify the way that I do, but you should do things that Mike does, that the lumberjack landlord does, that Zuber does, and incorporate those into your portfolio to protect yourself from economic downturns. And Mike, howdy. How are you?
Good. How are you? In honor of your topic, I wore the rents due shirt because the number one answer is you just show up on their doorstep with a rents due shirt and say pay.
Recently, you know how sometimes you have the short go viral kind of thing, especially with our shorts guy that's doing our shorts. It hits that new ripple in the pond of people who just hate capitalism and landlords or just are defeatists. And so I've had a bunch of people lately come with negative comments. And my response before I block them is because it can be rude. You can argue with me all you want, but if you go into name calling in words or attack other people in the comments, it's blocked. After I say, you need to get back to work because your rent's due and I need it. So
It's tough living paycheck to paycheck.
it's tough living their paycheck to paycheck. That's your line, right? You
Yeah.
used to live your paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, 60% of Americans are out here living paycheck to paycheck. Well, 80% of landlords are living your paycheck to paycheck. You don't even know how hard the struggle is.
Exactly. Also, I don't know if you're aware. I mention Joe Kuhn as often as I can anytime stocks come up because I'm not a stock guy. I'll say, here's Azul, here's Joe Kuhn, go check them out. They've got way more knowledge on that than I do. Right. If it's investing at a distance, I go, hey, here's Mike. His YouTube channel is Millennial Mike. If you want to do more burrs and rehabs, here's the lumberjack landlord, because that's the what they do, right? And I suggest the people that do that. Joe Kuhn came out with a video today, and for the first time, mentioned me in his video, which I really appreciate, which is really cool.
Celebration. It's like 3 years in full circle.
It took 3 years, but that's okay. I never mentioned him to get more followers. I mentioned him to help the people because I'm talking financial freedom, making work optional. What's it like to retire early? And not everybody wants to own real estate. So it's kind of nice to have a channel that I've watched enough of his content because I'll be honest, before I retired, I started watching his content to kind of figure out if I could. Like it was not something that was clear in real estate because all of our portfolios are so different. I wanted to know if I was going to be ready, and it had nothing to do with income. So
that is a video time. Are you ready to retire? It has nothing to do with income.
Yeah, we should definitely make that video. I made one with the three amigos last week on Zuber's channel, One Rental at a Time, on the mistake we made. And the mistake that the three of us made that we're hoping you don't is we let work decide when we retire. Zuber had the worst day. I had the best day. Lumberjack Landlord had a sale complete at his company. It wasn't about us and it wasn't about our income. It was about work. And I think that was a mistake. So I want you to retire when you're ready.
Yeah.
And as with everything else, it should be about you. Before we get to the questions today, did you have a topic? You mentioned a topic in text earlier today
I did.
that we should
Insta-
cover.
yeah, an Instagram user reached out, Jack Stewart, also AKA known as John Walters. So, but he said, say Jack Stewart because he's friends with some people in the community like BuzzTune and them. And he had a question for us that's unique. And I'll read what he wrote and then I'll rephrase it if needed. So he says, first he says, hello, fellow night shift worker, because he messaged me at 3 a.m. when we're both working. He says, I was just listening to an audiobook while at work, and they said something that reminded me about a question I had asked Dion and Zuber, but never got a message back. So probably he messaged you on Instagram.
Oh, that's because we're not teenagers, but go ahead.
I think the problem is that it's a bad scenario and there isn't much of a good answer, but I'm curious to see what I would say, me, Millennial Mike. And so I'm bringing it to Dion to the group. He says, if you have parents, according to Dion, that will become a burden on you as an only child, what would you do? Because Dion often says, his number one goal is not become a burden on his children. He says, I want to help my parents, but at the same time, I don't want them to get used to my money as the answer. Their house is almost worthless. They don't have a lot of money to retire. Social Security won't be enough for them to live off of. The only thing they have going for them is that in a few years, they'll have the cars paid off, which will make them debt free. It's kind of a deep question. And so really, I think the overarching theme for the question here is, in what capacity should you provide financial outpatient care to your parents, possibly even siblings, and certainly your children? We could talk about all of that. What is appropriate to provide? And let's just start with grandma and grandpa or mom and dad.
So we have a couple of generations that have really been screwed over, and I'm hoping Gen Z breaks the trend, right? Gen Z, yes, every generation has the lazy people. We've had the hippies from the 60s, and we've had every generation blames the next one, right? But you have people in the millennials that are doing awesome things. There's Gen Z people that are doing awesome things. But education is more available now than at any point in history. So if we go back 100 years, 120 years, the idea was you have enough kids so that when you can't work the farm anymore, right? We weren't, it was pre-industrial really. Your kids took over the farm, you got to retire. Now the age, life expectancy was 45, 47, right? So it worked out pretty good. And then people wanted to make factories. We had industrialization. The Fords, the Rockefeller said, okay, we want the educational system to create factory workers, right? We want it to go Monday through Friday. We want a bell to start it, a bell to end it. We want a lunch break. We want people trained from 5 years old that life works the way it works in a factory. Take out that entrepreneurial idea and just browbeat it out of kids, because you indoctrinate people when they're young and you're more likely to get them. And so people couldn't go work in factories because how would they retire? So they created pensions. And the idea was pensions would pay you for the rest of your life if you put in enough time at the company. Then life expectancy started going up, wages started going up. Companies can't afford pensions for the remainder of your life. So we got tricked into that fixed retirement asset to the one where you contribute. However much you put into your 401k is how much is going to be there. Then you add Social Security to bribe older people to get out of the workplace so that younger people have a way to go to work and have some purpose in their life. And you have 401k and Social Security that give people, if you eat cat food and house hack with family and you rely on your kids, you might be able to survive your older age and hope that you run out of life before you run out of money. It sucks. So I think there are people like Zuber, us, putting out information saying, here's how you can make work optional. Hey, it might take you till you're 80, right? Some people will retire at 80, but here's how you do it. You could also do it at 35 or 45. And the more aggressive you are, the more you're willing to sacrifice, the more committed and dedicated you're going to be, the more likely it is to happen within 10 to 20 years, right? Or even sooner for some people. So we have most of our parents didn't grow up or even spend their 20s and 30s with YouTube University being around. And it would be weird in the 80s and 90s to listen to an audiobook on real estate, right? And what were your odds of not finding the next guru that was just going to rip you off? Versus you have channels like yours where you've made several fake guru videos in the beginning that got tons of videos. And it's kind of a little easier now to vet out the people that are saying, hey, give me 15 grand for a weekend and I'll teach you how to do anything. You'd be better off throwing 15 grand at an asset and losing it all. You'd learn more than you would in a weekend. So what do we do? What do you do with grandparents? Because I'm pretty sure you're not going to be taking care of your mom based on, my training and experience and interacting with you.
We'll see.
Not everybody is going to have my luck where my parents pass away while I'm in my 40s, right? And neither one of them ever needed a dime from me. I have friends whose parents rely on them. Cell phone, car insurance, car problem breaks down, they have to send money. So I think there are a lot of cultures where that's totally normal. I know that a lot of the passport bros are running into, you have a spouse, hey, it's great, but you have to send this much money every month to the family, right? Something they have to consider. Still cheaper. What do you think is reasonable? Because I think the relationship comes into it more than anything. I don't think you can, because one of the biggest problems I have with your favorite book, the Bible.
Oh,
one of the first few made rules is honor your mother and father. Well, what if your mom is a crack prostitute? You have to honor your father and mother if they're deserving of honor, in my opinion. So you support your family members that are deserving of support. If you have a family member that is never there for you, only takes from you, the most unhealthy situation to be in is being a giver when you have a taker in your life, because neither one of them have limits.
Okay, well, you give me a lot of stuff to work with right there. First and foremost, yes, the Bible is my favorite book. And no, God does not want us to honor a father and mother who are
one of the 10 Commandments.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And just like wives, submit to your husbands. Well, I mean, not if he's beating you senseless and a drug addict. Obviously there's some nuance there that maybe if you take things into context, instead of look at one specific. Anyways, it's very likely that 100% I will be taking care of both my grandparents. My biological mom I haven't spoken to in 12 years. And at some point, I will have to funnel money in that direction, because am I going to just let somebody, I don't know, languish in poverty? No, probably not. I don't know my biological father, so they can't get me there. But my stepdad, my younger brother's father, it's already fallen on me to figure out the retirement plan for pretty much everybody in my family. And I'm okay with this because I don't know. I don't know how to say this without sounding like an arrogant douchebag, which is, I always joke, but I am an arrogant douchebag. I was trying to really mask that when I talk to you guys, but I've just always kind of known and assumed it was going to be on me to fix all of the problems. Nobody else has the initiative. Nobody else has the drive. Nobody else comes up with the ideas. Nobody else makes the sacrifices, saves the money, did the investing. People at best can take care of themselves. I mean, I was paying for surgeries for my brother when he was, when I was 19. Shoot, I bought school supplies when I was 14 and got my first job at McDonald's, and my siblings needed a backpack. That's just kind of how it is. And I'm okay with that because I feel like it's my responsibility. I understand not everybody has that same opinion, but here, let me give you the nuance in this responsibility. And that is, you cannot provide charity to the point where it is a detriment to yourself. And this is something that I have a problem with the way that our country operates. We want to give out all of this foreign aid. We want to open up our borders to people to just walk across and come take advantage of social welfare systems and be an additional tax on our social safety nets. If we can't even help our own people, and we have people here in America that need help, that need money, that need more money invested into schools and infrastructure and the policing of certain neighborhoods in order to make those neighborhoods safer, so the businesses feel like they can come open up a business, and so that your fiveplex doesn't get both back doors kicked in like mine just did. You need more police, you need better roads, you need nicer schools, you need the aesthetic of the neighborhoods needs to be taken care of. Blight is a real problem. There's many cities that have abandoned houses, abandoned buildings, overgrown lots. You start beautifying these areas, or the evil word, which is gentrification. You do your best to actually improve these areas, and you help the people on the ground here in America first. However, we get so caught up with funneling out hundreds of billions of dollars in foreign aid. Now, you could make an argument some of it's necessary because, obviously we need to maintain a balance of power in the world where we're on top and where we don't let other people who have ill will towards us take over that balance of power. But if we put out money to the point where it's a detriment to ourselves and we can't even help ourselves, then I think we've gone too far. And so I think the same thing applies with family. Absolutely, you're going to be responsible for taking care of your parents, taking care of your grandparents, in my case, and siblings. It's just part of being a man. In my opinion, it's part of being a man. If you're a woman, call me sexist, but marry a husband who has the same type of opinions as I do, and you won't have to worry about it. Because I know at some point I'll probably be taking care of some significant other's parents, and that's okay with me. It's my responsibility. I don't have a problem with it. I just would say you need to recognize that very early on, take it extremely seriously, start planning accordingly, and then put yourself in a position to not fail.
That blood is thicker than water, which is half the quote, and it makes it sound wrong, right? You can't choose your family. You didn't choose them. You're not responsible for them. And I think it was Shaquille who said, I'm rich. My family's not rich. My kids got to do their own. I have basically two families, right? I've got my siblings and then my cousins. My cousins, I've had to block on every form of social media that exists. In and out of prison. I never called unless they needed something. And they might be in need someday, but I've blocked them and wouldn't talk to them. They're not my responsibility. You have to figure out where your circle is. I think I have friends I would give more to than I would give family members. And that doesn't mean you can't sit down and make maybe not even a contractual agreement, but a verbal agreement on what you will and won't help with. Right? There are certain things that we would, based on blood relations, you're more likely to be something like a donor for a kidney or something, right? So yeah, there are some limitations there. But when it comes to money, my answer is pretty much always going to be, I've shared how I did it with everyone for years. You've had access to the information just like everybody who's watching this video. And if you made those choices, that's on you. Now you put in somebody who has done the right things and falls prey to a bad lawsuit, a bad divorce, major health concern. Yeah, they're more likely to climb the ladder of getting help, right? But the person who's had decades of not working, decades of not saving, not planning, and all of a sudden their need to be retired is my problem, makes it not my problem.
So kind of on this topic still, I'll go down one more line of thinking because you had mentioned earlier different generations, boomers and things like that, how every generation wants to blame the next generation. And I think that is actually going to stop with millennials and continuing on because, not that we won't trash talk Gen Z, of course we will. I think that the baby boomers are going to go down in history as the single most selfish generation of our country and the pivotal point where we stopped being a nation of greatness and started degenerating. They have maintained power for about 50 years. And at every single opportunity that they have been given to fall on their sword, to pay for their mistakes, to answer for the policies that they put in place, they have decided to kick the can down the road. They vote to inflate, they vote to print money, they vote to go to wars that were useless over and over and over.
You think the boomers are voting for that?
I'm talking about over the history of them existing. Yes, absolutely. Who was the primary voting bloc during the 2008 financial crash? Who voted to extend and pretend for the bailouts? What policies do we have that are enacted by the representatives that they voted for that have destroyed the financial fabric of our country? Money doesn't exist. We just inflate everything away and we print. Nobody wants to answer for the reality, which is they have experienced this 50-year stretch of economic gain with a few minor sprinkles of downturn that they quickly figured out how to subsidize their way out of and push that debt onto the next generation. And that's why we're looking at such huge levels of income inequality or assets becoming so far out of reach that a regular person can't get it. I hear you say all the time, oh, things are affordable. You know, if you account for inflation, you look at this. Well, yes and no. Is it still possible to get into housing? Is it still possible to get started investing? Yes, but I don't think that it's dishonest to say that it's significantly harder than it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. And are there still ways to make it happen if you sacrifice and save your money and start with a house hack? Yes, but you didn't used to have to do that. The barrier to entry is getting higher. It's becoming more difficult. And the only people to blame for it are the people who have enacted the policies that make it this way. And they've got a 50-year head start on my generation. And I really think that there's going to, as we talk about Social Security, there's going to come a tipping point where I think it's going to be my generation and possibly Gen Z that have to say, well, somebody at some point is going to have to eat this freaking pile of crap that has been left for us. We can't just keep passing it on to the next person, or it will completely destabilize and fall apart. And I think the last two generations that it'll work with, by the time all of Gen Z is gone, if someone hasn't said, all right, we're going to be the ones to raise the retirement age. All right, we're going to be the ones who reform Social Security. All right, we're going to be the ones who demand that you cannot just print and quantitatively ease your way out of a recession. A recession is a natural part of the business cycle. Businesses are supposed to fail. No business is too big that it shouldn't fail. If you behave inappropriately and you lie, cheat, and steal to the American people, you deserve to go down in a ball of flames. And is it going to cause a huge mess? Absolutely. Is there going to be economic waves that cause a whole bunch of damage? Absolutely. But if instead we put a Band-Aid on top of it and allow it to fester so that it can explode even later, so our generation can die before it happens, well, all that's going to happen is there's going to be a compounding effect down the road that will be even more catastrophic and destructive. And really, I truly believe that if millennials and Gen Z don't say, yup, it's on us to say, sucks to be us, wasn't our fault, we didn't vote for this crap, the generation before us did, but if we do what they did, we're just, eventually it's going to completely destabilize.
Okay, so not a political channel, so we won't be on that too much. You have some valid points. I will say one thing where I don't think it is as much generational as it is age-based. So if you're 20 in the 60s, 20 in the 90s, 20 in 2010, you're still 20. I think the same things happen. So here's a phrase. Let me know if you've heard this phrase before. If you don't vote Democrat when you're 20, you have no heart. If you don't vote Republican when you're 40, you have no brain. So if we go to all of the blue states with massive inflation, massive regulations that limit building, so you have more inflation, higher rents. The reason I asked, you think boomers are doing that, is because it's the younger generations that vote that stuff in. You have to go to a red state where it is older people, the 40-year-olds voting in, the 50-year-olds voting in, the politicians that are, yeah, we need a big military, we need a strong border, but we don't need all these social programs. We need 2-year welfare. We don't need 15-year welfare. We need, right? So you go back though, the same age people, the 30 and 40-year-olds in the 70s, voted in or voted in the people into office who took us off the gold standard, put us on a fiat currency, right? That started this inflation that we've been on, like you said, for 50 years. I don't think it's boomers. I think it's people 30 to 40 that keep voting the same way. Look at the problem we have now. Tons of people leaving California and New York, going to Florida and Texas. And how many years in a row was Arizona a red state? And then all of a sudden it was a purple state, because people left the blue states and continued to vote the same way. So I don't think it's generational. I don't think we can blame boomers or Gen Z or Gen Y or anything, but at certain ages, people vote a certain way, no matter what generation they're from. I see Dividend Dave threw out a dad joke, of course. Howdy, Dave. My son had a warning for you about your hairline in our last video. How do trees show love? They pine for each other. Ouch. And Millennial Mike is going to be joining us in our course video in 2 weeks, I believe, or is it next week?
It's next week.
It's next week.
Next week,
right.
Yeah.
Lumberjack Landlord is in 2 weeks. Next week, you're joining us. So if you want to spend an hour on Zoom with Mike, that's next Tuesday, 6 p.m. Let's go. So howdy, everybody. We're going to kind of cut through those today and see the questions. Native to Earth, thank you for coining the income snowball. Thank you. I'm sure it was said somewhere before in the history of ever, especially with Dave Ramsey having the debt snowball method. But the income snowball to me is really important because in stocks, you have compound interest. In real estate, you have compounding sources of income, right? Each different real estate portfolio aspect of making money, and then rent increases and expenses not increasing as much as rents. Jacob, howdy. I have a question about location. Do you know anything about the Spokane, Washington market? I'm moving out there this summer and am excited to be part of that community. Jacob, I would try to connect with Cody Davis. Cody is moving to Spokane and he'll be in that area. I believe that's the rumor I've heard
I
recently.
hadn't heard that, yeah.
Okay, don't know if it's not 100%, but if it is, you heard it here first on accident, probably. That's kind of like when somebody lets you know that they're pregnant and says, don't tell anybody until we announce, and you don't know when they're announcing. What do you know about Spokane? I know a few things, but go ahead, Mike. What do you know about Spokane?
I mean, I've served a couple of SWAT warrants over there in the last year. They have a bit of a homeless problem in the downtown area, but it is pretty. It's a little bit cheaper than Seattle. It's close to gorgeous Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. In terms of the rental market, I don't really think much of stuff in Washington works. It's slightly more landlord friendly than King County, but it is still in the state of Washington. So yeah, sorry, man. I can't give you more help than that.
I know that it's growing. There's been a big move of people moving there, primarily because they want to stay in Washington, but they don't like the politics of Western Washington. I think you want to study the market for 60 to 90 days to understand what normal is, because one of the mistakes a lot of people make is they go from California to Boise and they think, oh, this place is a third of what I would pay in California. It must be a great deal. And you get there and you realize, well, the rents, the taxes, the turnover, and all of that made it, and the way the winters are in comparison, made it a not good investment. Take the time to study the market, to learn, get a good rent box built, just as good as your buy box. You want to know your rent box. Rents are very different. And it's not just here a 2-bedroom gets you 2,000 and here a 2-bedroom gets you 1,300, right? It's what gets you better tenant retention. In Western Washington, my carports attract more tenants than my garages do. In Eastern Washington, I don't know if that's the same because it's a pretty windy area. Carport's probably not as attractive. What physical aspects? If you're going to buy in Arizona, a pool is probably a good thing in certain aspects. In Washington, Zuber's not wrong when he says it takes a minimum of 60 to 90 days to learn a market. And it's not just what the rents are, but it's what is desirable to tenants in that area. And then find the local meetups. Figure out the investors that are doing it there successfully. I have heard of a lot of people that have moved there and done well. I know people in Western Washington who invest in Eastern Washington and seem to do well. I think Cody's the first one I've heard of that's moving there, if that's true, right? I trust the source. I'm the person with the perfect memory, right? So we know not to trust that. Drop out and retire early. Hey, it's Dion, the Mr. Landlord of all landlords. Awesome. Let's see if we got a question here. Native to Earth real estate entrepreneur. That would be you and lumberjack landlord. I would call you real estate entrepreneurs. You took something like real estate and then you found a creative way to do it faster or bigger, right? You've got the slow burr, you've got private money, you've got all the rehabs you've done. Lumberjack is self-managing a portfolio over 100 units and doing his jail thing. And I'm not the entrepreneur. I am from the MLS, conventional lending, waited 10 years to do my first rehab, last rehab, and didn't like it. Bo Thornton, not a hater at all. I appreciate what you do. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate the question because it was a great one I can cover in a video so people understand that, yeah, there's a lot of risks when it comes to investing, and it is our job to mitigate those risks. Mike, really quick while I look through the questions. What are some things you've done with your portfolio to be ready for a recession, an economic downturn, or tenants not paying rent?
Well, tenants not paying rent is the most likely outcome. Economic downturns happen. They happen very rarely, as I just got done elaborating on. We do everything we can to actually avoid those impacts. Look at mortgage forbearance. Look at rental assistance programs that got put in place. Look at eviction moratoriums. Look at stimulus checks. I mean, we do everything we can to avoid any type of accountability for poor economic behavior. So it does happen, but it's a lot more rare. And then in terms of rents going down, that one is the most rare. Dion's famous for saying, and I'm sure he opened up with this, you know, I mean, the stats have been kept on rents over the last 115 years. And if you look at any 5-year increment of time, rent has never been down. And there's been times where for a year or two, rent dropped 1 or 2% and then recovered very quickly during some sort of economic recession. But if you think of a 1 or 2% drop on $1,000 of rent, well, that's $20. So my apartment's renting for $1,000. Oh, we're in the middle of a recession. It's now renting for 980. Yep, that's the graph right there. And if it starts renting for 980 instead of 1,000, is that really going to be detrimental to you? Typically, what I recommend that people look at purchasing is cash flowing assets with a minimum positive cash flow in my market of $250 per door day one. So you would have to have a substantial decrease in rent, like we're talking 50% drop in rent just to break even. And that's never happened before. So very, very unlikely. If it did happen, I would say things are so destabilized, maybe as I was talking about earlier, that that's probably the least of your worries at this point. We'll probably have bread lines and toilet paper lines and things like that at that point. Or some type of hyperinflation or so. I don't know. But how do I plan for the most plausible out of all of these different scenarios, which would be tenants not paying their rent? Well, I don't invest in a state like Washington where it really takes a long time to get an eviction done, unless you're Dion and happen to be in one county where he managed to get one done in 3 weeks. 3 weeks is the norm where I'm at. Certainly not the norm in Seattle, certainly not the norm in California, certainly not the norm in most places in a state like Washington that I've heard of. But if you have a tenant not paying, the ability to quickly extract them from your property so you can get it back on the market is important. That's a good thing to invest in a state like Indiana for. And next, I am leaning heavily into Section 8. As I mentioned earlier, if you want to bet, you walk into a casino, the house always wins. Well, what if you could team up with the house and bet alongside them? Well, that's playing the real estate game with the federal government. Do you think programs like Section 8 are going to continue to expand, or they're going to retract? I think they're going to expand. I think we're going to put more people on the program, especially as that income inequality gap gets bigger. There'll be more food stamps, more Section 8, more down payment assistance programs, more. So people keep voting for the politicians. The politicians don't have to take accountability for their actions. They'd rather give stuff away, give you a fish than teach you to fish. And so I partner with programs like the Section 8 program because why? They're in desperate need of landlords. They're always going to pay. What do you mean that the tenants aren't paying rent? They don't have rent to pay. It's Section 8, or maybe they have a percentage. You know, $1,000 worth of rent. They're responsible for $150. Maybe they don't pay their portion, so I take a hit to my profit, but I'm still making money and not going to lose my property. All these different things are ways that you can ameliorate the problem of not having the money to make your mortgage payments or being foreclosed on.
Thank you. The way you did it in the different markets, I think that also helps. Right. In Seattle, if there's a big, huge downturn, I think people in Seattle or around Seattle, Tacoma are more likely to not be able to pay their rent than the Section 8 program, and Gary is going to be able to not pay their rent. So Robert Finelli points out if rents went down, prices went down market wide, it could correct itself fast, assuming nothing changed on the cost to down a home. Yeah. Yeah. It's so if something happens and people can't pay their rent, what else is happening? Right. People keep saying, well, there's all these layoffs and record low unemployment. Just because the people who own the media, Google, Facebook, all the tech industries do layoff, which represents less than 12% of the workforce. It seems like there's massive layoffs going on. But why is unemployment under 4%? Over 96% employed. So yes, is it a concern? On the backsplash of the kitchen. It's not even on the back burner. It's hung on a hook on the back. That, yeah, that's a possibility. It's out there. Oliver, howdy. Dion, what is your opinion on the NACA loan program? Do you have an opinion on NACA?
On the what program?
NACA. So basically, they you can buy a house for $1 from the city, and then you get the money, a loan to do a rehab.
I have not heard of that particular program.
Very limited knowledge of what that loan is, and why I would never look into it, and why I think it's probably a bad idea. Zuber says this in his daily update. You know, they keep coming out with new programs to buy a house or get the first-time buyer programs, which creates more demand on a limited supply. Now, if you give out loans on rehabs, how many new investors are you going to have that step in and go, I'm totally going to do this, underestimate the loan timeline, rehab cost, what their rent box is going to be based on their debt. You're going to increase demand on a limited supply. There are people who are good at real estate who will be very successful using that loan product. There are new people who will hear it and think, flipping, wholesaling must be easier than just buying something from the MLS, saving a down payment, having a good equity position. So it's not something I'm going to do. And that's why I haven't done enough research to go, hey, I've not gone, let me do a video on the NACA loan product. So I don't have enough knowledge to do that. I looked at it enough to go, not for me.
Government has no business doing something like that. If it was like a private loan being offered by a private lender, sure. But the government needs to stop messing around with tax dollars, because they're, like you said, Dion, a bunch of people with no experience are going to take this out. They're not going to remodel the houses to a sufficient level because they're going to underestimate everything. And it's going to be a giant waste of money. They're going to tout out the couple of intelligent people who did it right. And it's just going to, again, it's going to dump a bunch of money into the system, never increase the supply. And at the end, we'll just end up having more expensive houses and a lower value dollar.
Something I didn't think of that Robert points out here, thanks, Robert, is if rents and monthly house payments went down and incomes went down and you have a stash of cash, I'd be licking my chops, because that's called a buying season. Right. Lenders might disappear. So it's going to be a little harder to go out and get a loan to buy, right? But if you have money or the ability to raise money like Zuber did, in a strong economic downturn, and you think in decades, not weekends, right? Zuber didn't go in 2010 and sell properties in 1031 thinking in 3 months, I'm going to double my money. He thought in 5 years, I'm going to be doing amazing. Howdy, Laura. Good to see you here. Native to Earth, explain why you don't regret a mistake. I believe that's in reference to paying off a house was a mistake that I don't regret. Cost me $1 million. And just really quick on the numbers, and I'll keep this under 30 seconds. Around 2018, I paid off $121,000 in debt on my lowest mortgage in value, but highest interest rate. Right, is the debt snowball from Dave Ramsey, highest interest, lowest debt, avalanche, everything came together, paid it off. I could have at the same time, because in 2020, I put about $109,000 into a fourplex that has gone up about $1 million in value. I could have bought another fourplex and gained another $1 million in appreciation and much more cash flow than that paid off house gets me. So losing $1 million is a mistake. I don't regret it, because there is a level of confidence that comes from having a paid off property that is a piggy bank in case there is something wrong, an economic downturn. I can sell, I can cash out refi, I can HELOC, I can find a private money lender, right? I could do all these things. So it's not a mistake. It's part of the Swan account. It's not a regret. It is a mistake. If the goal is, I get $3,000 a month on a paid off house, it feels really good, versus I could have had $1 million and more cash flow from a fourplex than that house is giving me, and a new depreciation schedule and levered depreciation and appreciation on much more than I invested. The fourplex would have been the right call. That wasn't less than 30 seconds. I messed up. Wealth building journey. Chester is talking about DSCR, debt service DCSR. Did you mess with my little brain here? Debt service coverage ratio. So it's, yeah, you got it wrong there. The ratio after expenses, cash flow, monthly interest. Lenders determine this ratio to make sure that if nothing else, the borrower can pay the interest on the loan. The problem is, Chester, is they go for usually a 1.1 ratio. So if your mortgage is $1,000, the rents have to be $1,100. So when the question of the video topic today was if rents go down, how do you pay your DSCR loan? So that's why DSCR lenders might be okay with that, but I would want a better ratio than what they require. Robert says, not Southern New Hampshire. Unfortunately, the market is probably the hottest it's ever been, priced at all-time highs, and still multiple offers over asking. Same thing in Washington. Ask Beth. I think she's in the comments. I think somebody said it's Beth because I didn't see her name, but she must be here. So howdy, Beth. But yeah, tell us about those $160,000 over asking price offers that are still coming in. And then tell me where the crash is coming from, Crash Bros, because there's one coming every week. Native to Earth, I don't regret it because of all of the options that it gives me. And my goal wasn't the most cash flow return. I'm not going for the highest yield all the time. There were deals I could have went for that had a higher yield. Mike, your deals in Gary get close to double the yield that mine expect. I was looking for ability to self-manage, ability to house hack more than once, right? So multiple house hacks. I wanted the appreciation of a limited market. I wanted the right amount of cash flow from the least amount of units. So if I wanted the best yield, I'd own more in Gary. I think your strategy actually makes more sense if you're just chasing the best return. So native to earth, when it comes to making mistakes, sometimes the better outcome that you can look at logically and say that would have been the better one, which I probably should have bought the fourplex, right? Doesn't mean I regret it. Hopefully that answered that. Robert Finelli says there is a reason Matt stopped buying normal deals off the MLS. Probably. Oculus. Howdy. I'm probably about to have my first tenant turn due to tenant getting promotion. What things should I be thinking of? So tenant turnover, are you self-managing or property manager? Because that's a big difference, right? If you have a tenant turnover when you were in your duplex on the other side, that was you. Okay, I got to do a walkthrough inspection. I've got to calculate what's coming back out of their deposit. I've got to take pictures. I've got to think of what repairs need done, what upgrades I want to do that might increase the rent. Then I've got to list it. Like you go through the whole chronology of a tenant turnover. That's a video I haven't made. Oh, okay, I should do that. I've done the chronology on you have an accepted offer. So from going under contract to tenant, like what's that look like? I've done that 2 years ago. But I don't think I've ever done, here's what a tenant turnover looks like. And I could do it right now because I just had one, which is that text I sent you today. That was a terrible text to receive. It was very sad.
Yeah, I felt real bad for you on that one.
I'm sure you did. The text was, what was the gist? It was, can we meet tomorrow to give you the $5,400? Like, is that okay with you?
Is it all right if I just pay all of it instead of?
Yeah, that was the question. Can I just pay it all tomorrow? Yeah, so terrible. No, I don't want it all. So Oculus, yeah. Mike, tenant turnover with property manager. What things do you have to consider?
Well, with a property manager, they're the ones who are going to even be having those conversations in the first place. I'm not having direct contact with the tenants, so the tenants are going to be relating to them if they're intending on moving or moving out or breaking their lease or something. And the property manager at that point is going to want to try to schedule an inspection so they can get over there and make an assessment as to what type of condition the property's in. If possible, you want to try to be able to show the property to future tenants, even with the existing tenants in it. But you have to have that conversation with them. Hey, do you mind if we show this property to people who are interested? And you can only make that determination if it's in good enough state. Or if it's good enough condition. So obviously you don't want to show something that's bad. So it may be an option for you to show it with people currently living in it. And then you obviously need to figure out what condition it's in because, are we going to have substantial repairs or are we going to have a quick 3 or 4 days, get somebody in there and out, a couple $1,000s worth of paint and touch up to get it rent ready again? Or is this going to be a major project where we have to do huge? And I've had both. I've had quick turnovers and I've had substantially long 4, 5, 6 month turnovers, depending on what the problems were. And you may want to get it listed before it's even vacant. You got pictures from last time, put it back up on the website, schedule the showings to come in after the property is vacant. But yeah, really, it just comes down to you want to get it back, making you money as quickly as possible. And so doing everything you can to get it done as quickly as possible.
Cash flow is freeing. I understand you have one checking account, one saving account, combining rental and personal. Did you do the same strategy starting out your first 8 years, or did you have separate accounts, one for personal and one for rentals? I've never done extra accounts. Don't want them. Keep KISS principle, keep it simple. If you have LLCs, yes, you want separation. So if you have partners or if you're using hard money and you have a reason to have an LLC, you definitely want to keep separate accounts. And depending on the state that you're in, you might have to have a separate account for deposits. But no, I've done that since day one. I had a business account for my furniture company and a business account for my flatbed company. And those had LLCs, and they, say you have separation of that. But when I've done my taxes and been audited with rentals and having one checking account, one saving account, one credit card, no issues. So that's a good question. Thank you. I think I'm missing questions here. Native to Earth, by regretting it, you learn from the mistake by taking responsibility, but maybe we are thinking the same thing. Maybe, yeah.
I just think that what you talk about with the fourplex isn't really a mistake. It was just a choice between two options. If you think like a true mistake you've made in your life, I can think of actual mistakes I've made in my life, things that I do regret. And if I could go back, I would say, don't do this. Don't think what you're doing is noble and honorable. It's absolutely not. You're going to get taken advantage of. You don't have to put up with this type of stuff. You can get out and leave now. And absolutely, I regret that. And I would not advise anybody to make the same mistake that I did. And I would advocate against it. But in Dion's situation, it was, well, have a fully paid off rental or make $1 million over here. Yeah, I didn't make the $1 million. That kind of feels like a mistake, but I have this other positive. It's a choice between two positives instead of a choice between a clear negative that created damage and a positive or neutral event.
I think it was JNYC. I might have it wrong, but somewhere down in the chat, and I couldn't find it right now. He said, because you were talking about taking care of family, he said that's something that kind of lines up with you being a cop. Cops tend to take care of people. It's kind of what drew you to it, right? And I mean, I've heard your story of why you're a cop, and that kind of means it's in your personality to take care of people.
Yeah, a weakness, but it's also it's a positive attribute, but like anything, within moderation.
And then Julie has a really good point here of, in your position, maybe you should do some research into some of the social programs, because this has been something I've thrown back when people say, well, you make so much money. How much do you donate, tithe, whatever? And tithing made total sense before 1900s when we didn't have any tax. And it was like, okay, give something to the church. They have social programs. People go to the church and get help and aid, right? I absolutely got it. So what do we do now? We tithe about 50% to taxes for social programs. Yeah, some goes to first responders and infrastructure and military and all the things that we need, but a lot of it goes to the Section 8, BFED, child daycare subsidies, all of those social programs that, have you ever calculated how much property tax your tenants pay every year?
No.
So mine, like 2 years ago, when it was like $43,000 a year. That's a massive contribution to the social programs that are out there.
Right.
That is then available to our family members who have problems. Right?
True. I don't want to take help from the government.
Not for you, but I have walked friends through, hey, here's how you apply for Section 8, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not sleeping with you, so I'm not paying your rent, but here's a program that will. The government will F you all day long, and they can pay your rent while they're doing it.
They absolutely will. Now, I don't think putting more people on government assistance is the right answer, and I'll choose to live that in my own life. I grew up on Section 8. I grew up on food stamps, and I've seen firsthand what our welfare system does to the psychology of the people who are trapped in it. And I had the conversation when I was 16 years old and I was working at Walmart. And I remember my mom, Section 8 queen, food stamps extraordinaire, like savant, my mom. And I remember sitting there and being like, how come you can't get a job at Walmart that's open 24/7 like me? And I got told point blank, one of the only honest things she's ever said, well, if I go work at Walmart, I'll actually make less than I do in benefits. And now I no longer qualify for those benefits. So it's not a financially smart decision to go work. And at that point, at 16 years old, I was able to figure out how broken our welfare system is, which is why I know you don't want it to be a political channel. If you can't understand how horrible our welfare system is and our social service programs are, if you really can't figure it out, then you're willfully being ignorant. Because then that single mom with her 6 kids, of whom I'm the oldest, preached that message to everybody else. And that gets repeated by single moms and dual parent households that live on, and I'm not just targeting single moms here. We can target them at a later date, sure. But that mentality gets preached to people in poverty or on social welfare programs generation after generation. And what ends up happening, we just get more and more people on those programs, and those programs keep expanding because there is no method to transition you out of the program. There's great ways to get you in it, on it, keep you in it, keep you on it, but there's nothing that helps you get out, get off, and become self-sufficient. So no, I don't want to participate in that.
I think there's a question. I don't remember who it was, and I don't see it in the chat, but it was, is it legal? And I'm sure I'll see it at some point. If you have a family member who you help get on Section 8 and then you rent a place to them, I don't think that would be illegal.
I've never heard
and your place is certified for it.
Yeah.
I have not done that. I have tenants who I believe probably should qualify for benefits, and I've said, here's who you contact, but that's not family member or anything. Robert McNeeley thinks Zuber did retire the right way. Going out in a blaze of glory is priceless, once in a lifetime experience.
That is a good story. It is a real good pound sand story.
Native to Earth says, by the way, Millennial Mike sounds way better than Gen Y Mikey.
True.
Although it's Gen Y Mike's girlfriends, right?
Gen Z.
Gen Z?
Yeah,
but
Gen Z is the generation after.
That's not working anymore.
I already told you that I'm officially at the point where if a woman is a millennial, she's too old.
Yep. It sucked when my daughters got into their early 20s and I had to tell them, your friends are too old for me now. What is your phone number, Mike?
We're kidding.
F2.
We're sort of kidding. So financial freedom number, we've talked about this many different times. And I recently got asked this question by Dion at the Northwest Action Summit we went to, and he goes, I want to get you on tape saying this. And I said, after talking with the lumberjack landlord and really understanding the cost of healthcare, and how much it is when you still have young children. And again, I want more kids. I genuinely would love to have a large family, 3, 4, 5 wives, so I'm kidding somewhat. But I genuinely want to have a large family. I want to have a bunch of kids, and that's a very expensive thing that you have to be aware of. And so I think realistically that it would be irresponsible of me to retire until I'm making around $20,000 a month in straight profit, passive income, because the cost of healthcare is very expensive. Now, my actual, could I live and sustain just me and my son and break even every month, be right there at that very thin, skinny fire? Yeah, I mean, I could do that with like $4,500. I don't want to be thin, skinny fire. I want to be fat fire, and I want to have enough of a surplus so that I can actually take my mind off of any type of worry about financial things and spend more time with my family and just grow the real estate business. So I'm aiming for 20K.
I love the math. I think it's brilliant. I think you'll hit the 20K. And then a year and a half later, you'll be like, what do I do with 35? Because it's a bit hard to manage. I've got to figure out what to do with all this money.
It's a good problem to have. I'll take it. I'd rather have your problems than my problems.
Right. But I had your problems for 10 years too.
Part of the process. Just got to get there.
It is. Yeah. Oliver, when you have big trees on your rental property and your tenants bring up the next door neighbor wants the tree branch trimmed because it's touching their property, what is your process? First, the legal thing you need to be aware of is if somebody notifies you that your tree is unsafe and then it damages something, it's an insurance claim that can then go against your insurance. If your tree falls over and hits your neighbor's house, don't call your insurance company right away and say, we've got a claim, because it's not your problem. Unless they've notified you, that's an act of God and it's their insurance problem. I learned that the hard way by being on the other end of that. Know your state laws. I know Washington and California, where I have done arborist work, If part of a tree is coming onto your property, you have the legal right to cut it right to your property edge. And in some areas where there is a view law, so look and see if there's a code for views, you can cut the tops of trees that impede your view on someone else's property. Mike, what would you do if your tenant is the one that reaches out? Because that's the way this question is. And the neighbor wants a tree branch trimmed.
And it's our tree on our property and they want it
Right.
trimmed.
But
Yeah,
it goes on to their property.
right. Yeah, it's gonna be so situation specific, because to pretend that there aren't just erratic, neurotic neighbors who are crazy, that's obviously something that happens all the time. There's Karens out there for a reason. So is it within reason? Is it actually a problem? Is it destroying their yard by dropping a bunch of crap in it? Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to helping them out and paying to get that type of stuff fixed, cleaned up, and maintain the relationship, because I want good relationships with people that are around me. I don't want them calling the city every time a tenant does something stupid and then the property owner gets a fine. But if it's within reason, we'll take care of it. If it's not, then pound sand politely.
Yeah, I think the thing to factor in there is what kind of relationship do you want with your neighbors too? Sometimes it's worth it to just have it done. I'm trying to think, because I know that in Washington, whenever I look at a property, one of my criteria that I think I've said in like my members only groups or my course Zoom calls is I look at the trees. I'm buying a place. You came out here with me to look at this one. It had a dead big tree and a big tree, and I was like, "Yep, dead tree's gone the first weekend I own it. If I'm in there, and I know basically what that's going to cost me, factor that in." But I also look at the safety of it too. I think earlier this spring we had a freeze, and I sent you a picture of one of the trees on a property that was leaning away from the house, right? But I was like, "Yeah, it'll probably take out the neighbor's fence. I should just cut it down." So I had it removed. Um, keep a good relationship with the neighbors within reason, right? Situational based, the way you said. Dale says to love your neighbor as thyself, Dion.
Sometimes you got to show some love to those neighbors. Depends. There's
It
those
depends
neighbors
on the
right
neighbor.
across the street from you, if I remember right.
Yes. She asked something like, "Can I rent to a guy like you?"
Those neighbors, I'm telling you, it's all about relationships. I'm just out here trying to serve the community.
Native Earth said, "Paid the cost to be the boss." Mike, facts. There you go. And here's JNYC saying cops have that personality where they always taking care of others. That's just who they are.
Thank you.
Dividend Dave says, "Thanks, gotta spruce up my puns." There you go. Another tree joke, staying in the arborist trends. Fighter, I just added you as a moderator. Awesome. Angel Ari, good book regarding this topic is No More Mr. Nice Guy. There you go.
And that actually is probably that's I've never read the book, but judging a book by its title, I think it's an extremely important thing that you have to learn for life for everybody. But I think so many people miss out on that. There's a lot of people who get walked all over. I remember when we first met Michelle Meyer, who I saw in the chat earlier, and I first met her at a real estate meetup, and she was managing a property and she was telling a story, and it really sounded like she just was kind of getting walked on by the tenants, because some people are very, very kind, and being kind is a great asset to have. But unfortunately, sometimes it could be to your detriment. KB dollar sign, Kim Bishop's another one I've had this conversation with, being too nice to tenants. And she even mentioned an eviction she went through in here somewhere. Ultimately, being a police officer for me was very helpful, because my entire life I grew up being somewhat of a people pleaser and somebody who always tried to smooth things over, which is a great skill to have. However, when you're a police officer, there are some people that no matter what you say cannot be de-escalated, and you have to be able to recognize that and recognize, okay, and now it's time to switch on and control the situation. And they may try to kill you, pull a knife on you, shoot at you or something. You obviously, you're not going to de-escalate everybody at all times always. And so the best benefit that I had with becoming a police officer was I learned how to not be, no longer be Mr. Nice Guy, or whatever the title of that book was. You have to learn how to switch it on, especially as a property owner, because you run a business. And I'm very sorry that whatever the excuse is this month why you can't pay your rent, that 6 tenants give the same excuse. Oh, everybody's grandparents died the same week. Coincidence. But I'm sorry, the eviction is being posted, and I will happily help you try to get on some support, but we cannot allow you to just not pay your rent, or to destroy the property, or to not follow the rules, or whatever it is. You have to be firm and fair, but firm.
Too many inappropriate jokes came to mind while you were talking. So I'm going to skip all of those.
I like it.
Josh Burdick says, give a man a fish or something. And I think the Ron Swanson quote is the best one. If you teach a man to fish, he'll fish for life. If you give a man a fish, you will have one less fish.
Yeah.
JNYC, we took back a message to make me lose sleep forever and ever and wonder what he said. Enabling society is our downfall, Josh. Yeah, I've worked at places where I was in management and we'd have staff who could make more money and they said, no, don't give me a raise. If I get a raise, I lose XYZ benefit, like daycare or whatever. That's $2,200 a month if they got a $1 an hour raise. So we have a system that is fundamentally flawed. What is that? The road to hell is paved with good intentions or something? Ridiculous. Not sure if this is even allowed, but if you had family member that qualified for Section 8, buy in house and rent to them, I don't think it would be illegal. I would be transparent and let Section 8 know this is a family member. They would have to qualify. They'd have to apply, meet your other criteria, your standard criteria that you have for your other tenants. Kim Bishop, howdy. My very first roommate tenant couldn't pay rent because she sent money home to her mom. I started the eviction process and was able to remove her amicably, but I had a conversation with her about this. Life is about choices. I could see that. Good old times. Amen, Mike, to lack of baby boomer accountability. I still think it's an age thing, not a generation thing.
It doesn't absolve them of what they voted for.
Well,
I was young. That's why I voted to kick the can down the road. Whoops. Okay, well,
most of the boomers I know never voted. Like that's just not a thing. Most of millennials and Gen X I know never voted. I know like 20% of the people I know vote.
Inaction is still action. It's still a choice.
All it takes for evil to win is for good men to believe stupid.
Exactly. And if they didn't do anything, they're still partially to blame. Sorry, you have a response. You have a civic duty. That's actually built into our founding documents. You have a civic duty.
Financial firefighter says,
ignore?
Boomers built the world for themselves and pulled the ladder up behind them.
Yeah. In many ways, yes.
All Night Header says, I think there will be a link between Social Security failing and UBI being implemented. I could see an argument for that.
So dumb.
So baby boomers was the last generation to experience a draft. And there is that as well. Baby boomers were beneficiaries of Montgomery GI Bill and the Federal Highway Interstate Program. Right, but the GI Bill, when I was in as Gen X, you had to pay to get into it when you were making less than $500 a month. Right, well, it was a little bit more than that, but that was because I had family. And you had to pay out of each paycheck to be into it. So the GI Bill now, if you're a veteran, the GI Bill now is phenomenal compared to what it was. Elizabeth, I'm not a boomer, so I'm not defending them. I'm just saying, I defend when somebody says, well, Gen Z is the reason for blah, blah, blah. I was thinking, well, bull. Show me the person. Yeah, that person might be. Elizabeth R., I have a question. What are your thoughts on acquiring properties through tax sale auction? Have you personally done this? What was your experience and the pros and cons? Thanks. My brother did this. Have you done that, Mike?
I've looked into what it takes in Indiana. You got to sign up way in advance. They do it twice a year. Properties are very cheap. You don't get to go look at them ahead of time unless you illegally go break into them or look at them. You go look where they are because you know what they are. But you can't look inside of them unless you break into them. They're so cheap in a place like Indiana that a lot of people will literally just buy 10 of them and then try to wholesale them. And if they can even just sell like one, they'll make their money back on all 10. So you sell two, you're good.
There are people who do it professionally and they do a lot of research and they have teams, so it's possible. My brother picked one up. I have a friend who picked one up and she purchased it not knowing that the source of water was from a well on the neighboring property. And that family was the same family that lost it to the tax sale. And so they cut off the supply of water and she had to put in a well and ended up being basically a break-even full burr. So I don't know that it's like burr. I don't think it's a strategy I would start with, but if you have a large enough portfolio and the investment is a small enough part of your portfolio to where you can risk a complete loss or finding things that would make it cost you more than you expect, sure. There are some limitations, right? If you want to see the inside of the property, you're going to break in. That's a little bit more risky, depending on how much money you have for reserves for rebuilding. And other things. I know that a tax sale clears all liens, right? So you don't have the fear of there being some contractor's lien on it and you're doing a sale, but the tax sale clears all of that. So pros and cons, yes. Have I done it? No. When it comes to investing, I'm super boring, right? The four words that describe me and my portfolio: boring and not sexy. All deals from the MLS, conventional loans, save a down payment, or the most recently pay cash. Not something I ever thought I would be able to, but that's how it worked out. Um, no driving for dollars, no mailers, no flipping, no wholesaling, no rehabs until my most recent burr, my only burr. Yeah, so I haven't done any creative ways to find the properties. Should Spokane be renamed Spokane? Only in October. Dale, what is the best way to get Section 8 tenants qualified? Mike?
I'm not exactly sure what he means qualified. If you mean get them on the program, that's going to be totally different depending on the Section 8 standards of the city that you're in. Each housing authority is different per city, per county, per area. So, for instance, in Gary, Indiana, the wait list to get on the Section 8 program is closed. It's been closed for a very long time. They have substantially more people trying to get onto it than they have housing available, or they have vouchers available, dollars allocated for the fund. And so in order to get somebody qualified, they may be eminently qualified in terms of their income level and parameters that go into that. But if there's no openings, there's no openings. Now, if you're talking about how do you qualify a Section 8 tenant for your property, that's going to be based on your own standards. So Section 8 will have somebody who has a voucher, and then I can set on top of it my own standards for credit and whether they have a job or any of those types of things. That's your own decision. So my property manager still has a credit requirement, still has an income requirement, unless Section 8 is going to pay 100% of their voucher. And so it's going to be very situation specific.
Angel R has a very relevant question. Are you Team Chevy or Team Ford?
I got a Ford F-150 in the parking lot, but I also have a Chevy Corvette out there. So
I had a Corvette and I've had multiple Ford trucks. I'm actually a Toyota guy. I like the Tundra. It was the best truck I had. And I've had Raptor, I've had F-250, the compensator. And now I have an F-150 because I retired. But my next vehicle, probably going to be the Tundra. Maybe. Jason says unemployment is low because people have multiple low-paying jobs to keep their head above water. And while that is probably possible, it's not my experience, Jason. My last few years running a company, we couldn't find people to show up. Ghost interviews for over $20 an hour positions. Yeah, they didn't require a degree. They didn't require experience. They were just entry-level positions. But there's so many fast food places starting at $18 to $20 an hour. There are remote jobs that pay 20 something dollars an hour. And yeah, you're not going to live in Seattle or San Francisco or LA or half of California, but you can live in 60% of the country making less than $20 an hour and be just fine. And so those remote jobs, fully remote, and I did the math about a year ago, and I was going to make a video because I thought unemployment was going to go up, and I was saying, hey, here's something to think about. And I actually, my most viral short was done at your Gary rental when I had this thought too.
that is your number one.
It is my number one, right? If I take out truck drivers, because I ran a CDL school, so I have to know, I know a lot of truck drivers. Take all of them out. Over 50% of the people that I know, and only 54% of people are required to work in the office. 46% of jobs right now can be done either part-time remote or full-time remote. There's more remote jobs. And that's why Mike says, it's really hard to buy a house right now. Yeah, you want to live in Bonnie Lake? Sure. But what about Walla Walla? You move there as long as you got an internet connection, right? You can buy houses for $60,000. I pulled up. All right, I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is here. Let me share my screen.
It's a lot of money. I don't know if your mouth's that big.
I'm gonna open up something that doesn't show all the porn in my email. Okay, so just a Google search, right? So I'm gonna put up here. I'm gonna go to Zillow, and then I'm gonna click on buy, and I'm gonna put for sale, home types. Where's my price? I'm going to go maximum price, $200,000. And it looks like nothing, but now I'm going to go remove boundary and I'm going to go in Washington. Houses under $200,000. Yeah, some of them are going to need work. Some of them are not where you want to live. This is not where you're going to find the majority, but you come out here to where like there's 7 people living there. 189,000. It's where people want to live that homes are not affordable. I cannot navigate the interwebs. You come into the more expensive area, now anything under $200,000 here, you're looking at probably full tear down rebuild, like, or this is a tiny home in the middle of nowhere. None of these are my properties. I'm not endorsing any of them. I'm not saying go for any of these. I'm just saying that everybody going, housing is unaffordable because it's $600,000 for an average house in Seattle. It's 5 or 600,000 in Vegas. Yeah, because you have a sale go, a record sale last week of $35 million. And then Mark Wahlberg sold his house for 30 million or whatever the week before, or the month before. And that skews average and median. What you need to look up when you're talking about how unaffordable everything is and everybody complaining because you want a walkability score and I better be able to be less than 10 minutes to groceries, restaurant, movie theater. That's not going to happen. The affordable houses are a bit farther out. Housing is affordable, just not where people want to live or in the fancy houses they want to live in. I paid $100,000 for a house in 2000. And everybody goes, yeah, you got it way back in the day. Of course it was easy. 45-minute drive to the closest store. 10-minute drive to the closest gas station. It was about an hour to the closest movie theater, right? Yeah, sure. It was only $100,000. Power went out every other week because all the lines were above ground in Washington where we have trees and wind. So it was a rough place to live. Now it sells for $400,000 because what went into that town? Not one red blinking light, but 6 traffic lights, a Walmart, a Safeway, a movie theater, all the things that make it a town where it's now expensive to live. The people who say it's unaffordable are wanting to buy where their parents did now, but they don't want to buy it when it was the way it was when their parents bought it then. I see a super chat came in. Dion and Mike deserve a beer from Sam B.
Cheers. Appreciate you, Sam.
Thank you, Sam. I need a beer chaser. Does that help?
I need a weapon.
I have this because I have been married. And what is the most common way that a spouse takes out their husband?
It's poison when it's female to male.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Angel. We're going to be wrapping this up here shortly so I can get ready for the course video at 6 o'clock tonight. So I'm super excited about Zuber joining us tonight. You joining us next week. Angel R, you guys are Team Chevy or Ford. We solved that, I think. Would you guys proactively pay off a 7% mortgage if you can't find the next deal? Mike?
I was talking to you about this just the other day. I got 2 mortgages with 7.25% interest rates, and they've got about $60,000 balances on them. If I paid them off, my cash flow would double, but that would require a total of 120 grand to pay them off. And with that 120 grand, I could go buy a fourplex and completely remodel it and own it cash outright, which would pay me more money than those. So it's super situation specific.
So let me explain to Angel how much I agree with you. And I think you've started the train of thought that says I wouldn't pay off a mortgage at 10%. You'd think that's a guaranteed 10% return, right? So 7% is a lot, 10% is even more. I wouldn't pay off at 10% because if you take the same amount of money that you would pay it down like you did and you go buy something else, you now have cash flow. Your yield is you're shooting for in some markets 5, 10, 15%, right? And Gary, you were getting like 20s. In my area, I get like 10s. But let's say you're getting just a 5%. So if you pay off this mortgage at 10%, or you buy this one at 5%, people would say, well, the 10% sounds like more money, right? The 5% starts a new depreciation schedule. Gets you appreciation on at least 4 times what you're investing if you put 25% down, 5% more if you put 25%, just 20% down, 25 would be 4. You get levered depreciation, so you're not going to pay any taxes on that. Paying off fixed rate good debt is something I want my tenants to do. I'm trying to think if it was like, because 5% return with a 5% annual appreciation. Yes, we've had 31 and 24 in Washington, and it hasn't sucked. Like your duplex, you bought it for X, now it's worth a little bit more.
Right.
That doesn't suck, right? But so the average annual return on real estate is 5%. So if you put $100,000 to pay off the mortgage, or $100,000 to buy a $400,000 property, you gain 5%. That's $20,000 in appreciation. You've experienced some principal pay down. You've started new depreciation schedule. You have the 5% that's cash flow that's not taxed because of the depreciation. So no, even if I couldn't find the deal at 7%, I wouldn't pay it off. Then I would add chronology of your investing. Are you just starting out? Are you in growth phase? Are you in stabilization phase? Or are you in retirement phase? Because at some point, no matter what the interest rate is, it might make sense to just pay off the debt, right? There are people that are at the point where they don't want to grow anymore. They don't want to add the properties. I couldn't find the deals in my market that I wanted. So I expanded my market out because remote workers are working a bit farther out than they were before. And I looked at 11 new markets, found 2 that made sense, and started making the offers on deals that made sense because remote workers pushed rents up, but not prices because they can't buy because their company owners might call them back into the office next year. So they don't want to own too far out, but they'll rent out there. If I didn't find those, then I was going to go to Mike and say, hey, share your systems with me. Who's your property manager? Where's your turnkey guy at? Right? I would find the market where it does make sense. So instead of debt pay down, I would think of changing assets or changing markets. That's how I look at it. Doesn't mean I'm right. It's just what works for me. I see we had.
Did
Go
you see
ahead.
the super chat from Wealth with Rentals?
Saw that just come in. Wealth with Rentals. How do you calculate cash on cash return if you buy a house you want to remodel, rent out that has a few lots you can sell? That is a very confusing math program that would go through, let me see. So cash on cash return, if you're going to buy the house to remodel and rent it out, and has a few lots that you can sell. So a lot of this is going to be, I don't want to say gambling. What's the other thing? Speculating. You're speculating on, this is what I think I can sell the lots for. Can you divide the lots? Have you checked with the municipality that they're going to play ball and let you do that? What's the timeline on doing that? What's your burn rate every month that you haven't got it done until you can do it? So those are some of the things to consider. Then on the rehab, another thing where this is where I would look at year 1 investing versus year 10 investing. So in year 1, it's total guesswork. How long is my rehab going to take? How much my rehab going to cost? What are interest rates going to be back when I refinance at the end? Like all those things that make a BRRRR very risky are elements in this maybe hypothetical that you're throwing. Maybe it's a real decision you're looking at. So if you're going to remodel it, what's the cost of that? What's the duration? What's it like to work with that municipality or county to figure out their permit process? I learned in mine that I just did a BRRRR in where I was told by 2 or 3 different contractors in the area, it's going to take about 3 months. It took 10. Thank you. All of the permits, problems in this area. And then your cost, right? Contractor said 30, so I guessed 50, set aside 80 and spent 62, right? So it's kind of going to be more than what you expect. Now, Mike, you're kind of getting this dialed in. You've done several. You had some BRRRRs where interest rates kind of bit you, but somebody that's at your stage can look at a thing and go, okay, these are the things that need rehab because I had an inspection. I can kind of give an estimate of what it's going to cost and how long it's going to take. We don't have that skill set in year 1. Right? So that is a lot to factor in. And can you handle if the lots don't sell? Can you handle if the rehab costs 3 times as much? Can you handle if the timeline is 3 times as long as your estimate? There's a lot to that. So Mike, your answer, how do you calculate cash on cash return if you buy a house you want to remodel and rent out that has a few lots, and you can sell?
From a purely mathematical standpoint, you would literally just calculate your regular cash on cash return, which is the money that you make as profit yearly divided by the cost to acquire. And then if you wanted to factor in the additional lots you're going to partition out, well, you can take the cost to acquire and deduct what you'll be able to sell those extra lots for. And it may come out or come back as you had no cash to acquire as you partitioned off those lots and you sold them out. You're just all profit, no more cash to acquire is even invested in. That's the math behind it. But I agree with Dion's point. And Wealth with Rentals, Sam, he's a G, he's a good dude. Saw him down at the Zuber event. I know he's been doing it in real estate for a little while, but this is a very complex process, as Dion was just illustrating. There's a lot of things that could go wrong, permits, and can you even do what you think you can do? How certain are you? Have you gotten all the approvals before you purchased on it? There's a lot of ways to fail. Is it great for a beginner investor to take on this project? Probably not, but could it work out? Absolutely. Could you be the guy for the deal? Absolutely. It's just definitely there's more hurdles to overcome along the way. So just be prepared for that.
Probably some of the last couple of questions we'll go through here really quick. Mr. Nice Guy. The name of the book, No More Mr. Nice Guy. So we got Mr. Nice Guy here. You're not allowed to be yourself anymore. Mike, were you one of the cops who busted retired Navy Captain Bruce McNeeley in Seattle?
No, that wasn't me.
Okay. And I like the little smirk that says, I can't talk about it. Angel R asks Mike, do you raise rents yearly or every 2 years?
Did we have a year where rents went up 50%, or did we have a year where rents went up 3%? Totally situation specific. Did a tenant move out and now I'm relisting it, or is it the same tenant in there? Is it a tenant who's in there who I don't like and want to give a reason to leave, or is it a tenant in there that I really like and will love to compete for their business to keep them? All those different things are things you should be considering. So the answer is, I don't know. Completely depends, bro. But obviously, you want to make as much money as you can and not leave any on the table. So, have you ever heard of the binder strategy?
Oh, that was hilarious. You were at the table, right, when that happened?
Yeah. Yes,
so
I was.
It was a surreal moment, which I really appreciate. And I got to meet a really cool person, somebody with a good heart, because they were trying to share something that they liked. But we were at an event recently, and somebody sat down next to me at a table with some other people to share this idea that they had heard about called the binder strategy. Had I ever heard of it?
Dion, trademark it.
Ash, congratulations. Ash says, Dion and Mike purchased my first investment a few months ago. The roof is only partially new, so I've been keeping 20,000 in reserves. I'm tempted to use my roof money down payment for a second investment. I put 25% down on my first. Maybe I could use a HELOC if there are immediate roof issues with my first property. Is this a bad idea? First thing to consider is if you're going to do a HELOC, go talk to a lender right now, try to put one in place and see how much equity they think is in and how much of that equity they will allow to be used for a HELOC. They don't give you 100%, right? So if you put 25% down, that means you're 75% loan to value on a very recent purchase, which should be fairly close to what the appraised value was. So if a HELOC will let you go up to 80%, you have 5% of the equity. If they'll go up to 85, you have 10% of the equity. Right? So how much can you do? How much credit do you have? How many credit cards do you have available? How much do you make from your job? How much can you save every month? There's a lot of factors that go into how low would you go in reserves. Do you have anything in a retirement account as an emergency fund? Do you have anything in a stock portfolio that, yes, if you take anything out of retirement or stock portfolio, you're going to pay taxes, could be paying penalties. There's a lot to consider there. I would reach out and ask Marco Shiro, the financial firefighter, what happens if you acquire your properties really fast and then you have evictions or rehabs or remodels at the same time? And then the roof goes out, right? There's a lot of things to consider there. Mike, you are doing this much faster than I did. You have more units than I do in half the time. I liked the idea of adding a property every 2 years, give me time to stabilize, figure out what was wrong with it, be ready for root intrusions, be ready for roof failures, be ready for evictions, whatever I would have to go through to give me time to grow and scale. If you just got your first a couple of months ago, I don't know that I would put all of my money that I was counting as reserves, because your lender is also going to require that you have reserves into your next property. If the deal's good enough, you might look into it, talk to your lender to see what they require. What is your advice, Mike? If they just purchased a few months ago, got 20,000, they're looking at buying their next one, and go.
I have a friend that I talked to for several years and finally got her to buy her first rental property. Very nice lady. She lives in New York and she buys the first rental property. Super exciting. Great moment for any investor. And then she got, I mean, like the only thing she's just straight up addicted, man. She has a problem. She's on the fence, bro. It's bad. She then bought like 7 in the next 3 or 4 months, which is amazing. It's fantastic. She started borrowing money and pulling out of 401ks and all these different things. But what you need to remember is that whenever it comes to real estate, there is a process. You buy, you stabilize, you optimize, and then you manage long term, or you have an exit strategy. So buying is honestly one of the easier parts of doing real estate. I know it doesn't seem that way for everybody who's getting started, but that's because this is the first hurdle you're coming across. Next, you have to stabilize, which if you buy a turnkey rental kind of comes built in, but for a lot of people, it doesn't. And if you're looking at, okay, well, I'm going to need to remodel it, I'm going to need to fix it up, I promise you the learning curve there is huge and typically very expensive. And then even once you get it stabilized, well, then you have to optimize it. And optimization could be at the same time as stabilization, and it could not. It could be, okay, well, all right, I've purchased it. I got some of the bad tenants out. I got tenants in there, but now I'm going to do all this remodeling, or maybe there's things that I need to add. I need to add a bedroom here, or I need to do an ADU here. There's a lot that goes into the stabilization process. And optimizing and stabilizing both take time. It takes time. And so if you try to compress time, if you try to force it too quickly, what ends up happening is you buy 6 properties in a 4-month period and none of them are rented out yet, or 1 or 2 of them have gotten rented out. And you look back and you say, I got 6 mortgage payments and ain't nobody paying any rent yet. Or I've got 1 tenant or 2 tenants. So can it work? Absolutely. Is real estate investing a skill? Yes. And like all skills, it gets better with time if you put in the work. Nobody that you watch on TV playing sports like Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant was as good as they were when they played in the NBA when they were a kid. It took years of learning. I started with turnkey. And then I jokingly always say, after I did a couple turnkey rentals, I started taking on some properties that needed light remodeling. I call them diet turnkey, low calorie, zero sugar turnkey rental properties, just a little bit of work. And then I moved into bigger rehabs. And now I'm into full gut 6-month to 8-month long projects that are going to be a full gut rehab, rip everything out, new electrical, new plumbing, new HVAC, new floors, new walls, new everything you can think of. But I could not have done that successfully day 1 or even day 2 or year 2, or, it took a long time to get to that point. So be careful.
Couple questions we're going to rapid fire answer here. And then we're going to wrap this up for this week. Native to Earth, thank you for the questions. They're much appreciated. Last question from you. You say tonight is, can you Section 8 just a room in your single family house? Yes. Section 8 does do rent by the room. So check with your housing authority as to whether they have vouchers for that or anybody waiting for something to open up. Section 8 will also help people buy houses. There's a lot of things with that program that people should research. JMC says, how do interest rates spike affects beginning investors with expenses on the rise and also property prices go up? What does one do? So quickest short
$1 million
answer
question
is this is what shifted for me with high prices and high rates, right? So for 10 years, we had prices going up and interest rates coming down. So speed was my best friend. And this is what I said at the event that we just went to. I wanted an offer in before sellers realized they were going to be inundated with several over asking, waiving contingency offers, so that when they saw mine and they accepted another, I would get into second position and say, when theirs falls through, mine still stands. And I got half my portfolio that way. That doesn't work with high prices and high rates. So what I did is I shifted to watching days on market. Average days on my market, based on some information I got from Beth, was between 6 and 9 days. So I started a search of 30 days. I started making low offers on properties that sat for more than 30 days. And then I shifted it to 91 days. And I realized that in a lot of brokerages, people can list a property for 90 days. And then at 91, they relist. So I was only seeing properties that were relisted, meaning nobody had made enough offers for it to go. They hadn't been just forgot about. They had actually actively relisted them. So find out what's normal in your market for how many days on market is normal, triple that, set up a search for more than that. And then I looked for properties that were listed for 500, offered 4. Properties that were listed for 430, offered 390, right? So disrespectful offers on properties that sat longer than normal. That's what I shifted to do with high prices and high rates, to find a price that actually made sense for me at even the higher rates. Thank you, Ash. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. With that, Mike, if somebody wants to reach out and they have questions for you, and they're not just coming next week to our course live stream at 6 p.m. And for the month of May, remember the course has been reduced to $545 or $47. How can they find you?
You just go on Google, Instagram, or YouTube and type in Millennial Mike. I talk all about how to get started investing at a distance. I talk a lot about creative financing. I talk a lot about how to network virtually, because a lot of deals are not coming off the MLS right now because interest rates and prices are high. Virtual networking will lead you to meeting enough people so that you can find off-market deals.
Nice. And with that, there are more questions. I'll be back next Tuesday, 4 p.m. Pacific. And like the topic for this video, sometimes if you put in a question and I don't get to it, I'll make a standalone video for it. I hope my information at least made you think. Until our next video, thanks for coming to my Dion and Mike talk.